The instinct of the ordinary people of this country is profoundly against submerging this country into a new organization which will gradually remove their control and the significance of Britain as a nation.
Britain's prosperity and Britain's influence in the world depends on our cooperating and not trying to act in isolation in the modern world. If by chance the vote were known, we would come out. Our export, our investment plans would all be put into a state of very considerable confusion, and I think we would be taking a step into the unknown.
And we are winding up this our special first report coverage of the major issues in the referendum with a discussion between two of the most influential protagonists in the whole common market debate, Mr. Roy Jenkins and Mr. Enoch Powell. Gentlemen, you've both argued all the main points in this great debate many times over in the course of the past few weeks, conclusively proving that the other side is wrong and that your side is right. And I think the viewer may still be just a little baffled about this conflict of total certainty. So I wonder if you would take this last opportunity of convincing First Report viewers that yours is the case to vote for. Mr. Powell.
Who, me?
Yes.
Well, I think that the most remarkable thing that's happened in the last 24 hours, and it's very relevant to your question, is the declaration by Edward Buchanan that in his opinion, and who should know better, something like half the Conservative members at heart would vote no, and for all we know, since the ballot is secret, are voting no.
But Mrs. Thatcher, the leader of the party, says this is nonsense.
Well, she's got to say that, hasn't she? She would be in a position if she didn't say that. So I'm afraid that is evidence that we have to discount. And indeed, I hope to contribute later today some positive evidence which shows that Mr. Buchanan, who ought to know and who has nothing to gain by this disclosure, is broadly correct. Now, this is very important because it shows how misleading the whole apparent weight of authority which they've attempted to bring to bear upon the electors in this campaign has been. Millions of loyal Conservatives going out tomorrow to put their cross against yes because they believed that consistently that was what their well-known representatives and their party had stood for year in and year out, suddenly told, in circumstances which make it very difficult to doubt, that that's not so at all. That on the contrary, this was a dragoon decision in 1972, and that they, the electors, are being dragooned still. Now, this is material because, in my view, this is a matter of instinct. This is a matter of the instinct of the ordinary people of this country, and I'm certain that that instinct is profoundly against submerging this country into a new organization which is destined to become a new state, which will gradually remove their control over the way in which they are governed and the significance of Parliament and the significance of Britain as a nation. And I think this is, in the last resort, a matter of the heart. We may argue, but in the end, I respect the man who says, I wish to see a future for myself and my children in a great European state. I've always said this. I respect him, provided he says so plainly. I respect him for it. And we have to judge by our instinct. And that is the only reliable guide for the electors tomorrow.
Mr. Jenkins.
I don't think Mr. Buchanan's all that significant, but I don't want to get involved in these Conservative Party affairs. I think that we should judge this, I think the people will judge it, on a combination of heart and head. I think that's how all great issues should be decided, and I think this is a great issue, and I hope we'll have a heavy poll to decide it, and decide it decisively.
Does your heart take you in a different direction from Mr. Powell's heart?
Yes, it does. It does. My heart takes me quite strongly, as well as I like to think my head on this issue. What I think, looking back over the campaign, is that the statistics and the counter-statistics will be forgotten and buried pretty soon. But the basic issues will remain with us for the rest of our lifetime, and the basic issue, as I've seen it throughout and see it now, is my conviction that Britain's prosperity and Britain's influence in the world depends on our cooperating and not trying to act in isolation in the modern world. And what has emerged absolutely clearly are two things. First, that there is no alternative group of countries with whom we can cooperate. All our friends in the world want us to stay in. And it's a question of staying in, not going in. We are in. And secondly, while the long-term effects can be very profound, and will be very profound over a period, there's also going to be a very sharp short-term effect. If by chance the vote were no and we were to come out, make no mistake about it, we would wake up in an economic climate next Monday morning, which I would regard as dangerous and a state of some confusion. Our export, our investment plans would all be put into a state of some very considerable confusion. I believe the job and the inflation prospect would immediately be worse. I believe we'd have to face a heavy and immediate cut in the standard of living because we couldn't expect others to go on financing our deficit. And I think we would be taking a step into the unknown with no alternative strategy having been put before us by the campaign, by the anti-marketeers.
Well, I fully agree with what Roy Jenkins says about the statistics. This is a question where you've got to decide on the undisputed facts about the common market, on the price of food. The undisputed fact is that the common agricultural policy is based upon excluding cheaper food whenever that can be obtained. Now, one can make certain conjectures on that, but that is the basis. That is the principle of the common agricultural policy. And similarly, on his point of where are we to go, then I don't think conjectures or statistics will help you. I think what you have to look at is what was the position and how was it developing before 1973. Only 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago. And therein lies the answer.
But in very different economic circumstances.
Well, in different economic circumstances, in that, of course, instead of having a severe deficit with the EEC, we were roughly in balance with it. But I was going to mention that before we entered, and this had been a progressive, continuous thing, this isn't just taking 1 year, our trade with the EEC over its tariff barrier was increasing. And although our trade with the Commonwealth had fallen to a relatively small part of our total trade, we were replacing that with a growth of trade in almost every other sector of the world. And there's no reason at all to suppose that that cannot be resumed. And as for the effect tomorrow, I believe the world is going to say, why? The British have taken a pull on themselves at last. Of course, Roy Jenkins was quite right when he says we have to face a cut in our standard of living because other people won't go on carrying us indefinitely. He's quite right, but the common market's not going to go on carrying us either. But we shall realize and be asserting, as we haven't for many years asserted, that we recognize that it's up to us. And that will be the psychological effect after a no decision tomorrow.
Mr. Jenkins said today that the antis had virtually given up.
Do I sound like it?
Well, I was wondering, because in fact, having said that you didn't want to go into the statistics, you were tending to go into the statistical facts.
No. I said, look at your past experience, which we all of us know.
I also wonder whether or not this sudden entrance of Mr. Buchanan onto the scene is not a last desperate ploy, possibly, as it might be seen by Mr. Jenkins' side, to activate a losing side.
But why should a man who has that background and experience and position in the Conservative Party, with nothing that I can see to gain, take the most effective opportunity of declaring what must be his conscientious opinion, and there's no one better placed to form it, on the balance of opinion in his own party? A man only does that under pressure of great internal stress.
Why is he better placed to form it than the leader of the party?
Oh, because certainly is. It's his function to tell the leader, as chairman of a 22 committee, to tell the leader about what the backbenchers are thinking. That is what we employ, as it were, the chairman of a 1922 committee for, to understand just that.
Mr. Jenkins, of course, your party will be in a certain amount of disarray, even should you win this referendum as you anticipate, because I might say your cabinet will be in some sort of disarray. What do you think the effect of this split, because it's been seen to be a split, will have on the continuing Labour government?
I think, frankly, we've got through it better than I expected. I was always very sceptical about the effect of a referendum, which I thought might be dangerous upon the Labour Party. I don't say it hasn't imposed strains, of course it has, but they've been less than I would have expected before the referendum campaign started. If I may go back to some of the points which Mr. Powell made, I'm not sure I exactly said he'd given up, but I thought that hope of victory was receding a little. I'm bound to say that's been enormously confirmed this morning, because Mr. Powell does normally try and put Sarah's not economic, he's not very strong sometimes on economics, but Sarah's intellectual arguments to us.
Who's being condescending now?
But to clutch at this straw of Mr. Buchanan, I'm bound to say in this way. I would have thought if somebody was going to come in and make a serious contribution to the debate, they would have done it at an earlier stage when people could weigh up the weight of
I'm
what
sorry
they were
that
saying.
you should be so worried by it being introduced at a point when many electors are in fact going to be influenced, and very reasonably influenced, what they believe to be the opinion of their party and of their representatives. I should have thought that nothing was more germane on the eve of polling. Let's suppose it were a general election.
I know why.
And suddenly someone who is in the best position to know informed the electorate that the party didn't intend, or half the party didn't intend, what it was promising the electors. Wouldn't that be something that would be some little
No,
importance?
in the first place, I greatly distrust issues which are thrown into the campaign in the last 24 hours. It almost always means that they aren't serious issues where they'd been thrown in before. And secondly, it isn't really terribly significant for somebody to tell the electorate how they're going to vote. We'll all know how they voted on Friday morning. And my great concern at the moment is that they should vote on the serious issues and that they should vote in large numbers. The only thing that concerns me is a feeling that there'll be a low poll and a certain danger that people will say it's all over by the shouting. The yeses have won. The yeses won't have won until the votes have been cast and the votes have been counted. And what I want above all is a high poll. With a high poll, I'm very confident indeed.
A last word from
Well,
you, Mr. Powell.
the yeses won't have won even then, because the government itself has told us in the paper which they distributed to the electors that our continued membership will depend on the continuing assent of Parliament. That means upon the continuing opinion of the election expressed through the electoral process, between elections and at elections. So, as I've told anyone on the continent that would listen as well as hear, there's no answer that settles this question for Britain, except the answer no.
I think the British people want a settled answer. Parliament's given its answer several times. It's been an overwhelmingly decisive answer on a number of free votes, and I think what this referendum will make clear is that people and Parliament agree on this issue. And what I believe people as well as Parliament want is that this question, which has been there for 20 years, should be settled, and that we should be able to play a cooperative, constructive role, and thereby an influential role in the development of
And
Europe.
the government should not have told them the opposite to that in the paper which they
The government
distributed.
have not told them the
Well,
opposite
I
at
read it
all.
out to you. Our continued
Yes, but it
membership.
didn't happen to mean what you appeared in
Oh,
some
I see. Well,
extraordinary way
perhaps
to
you'd
think
explain what it
meant.
does mean.
What it does mean is that the people will decide upon this issue,
Yes.
and it does mean that Parliament can in the future change its mind.
Oh, yes, and
But-
the electorate
but-
can change their
and
mind.
the electorate can
But
change
why
its
does it
mind
say
about
the
Parliament, but
continuing
what is...
assent?
Well, because anything depends on Parliament continuing to support particular views.
Well, that's a
But
very
you-
important
but you know-
admission.
but you
That's
know
a
that-
very important admission
But there is
that
no-
this is going to remain foremost, and as the impact of being in the common market week by week, month by month, comes to bear upon the British people, they're assured that they have
But it's-
an open question still before them.
If
Surely
you
it's hard-
really think, Mr. Powell, that you are assisting the cause of British influence in the world by endeavouring always to give the impression to outside that we
Yes.
are partners who cannot be relied upon, and we will always seize any opportunity to go back, then I think you are gravely mistaken and are doing a grave disservice. I believe that the British people as a whole and the British Parliament will want to stick to a steady course because they believe that that is the way to have influence, to look after our own interests, and to contribute towards making a better world.
That, of course, will depend upon what the people themselves think of their experiences in the following weeks and months and years if we stay in, and what they do about that through Parliament. And no one should be under the misapprehension that we do not have not only the constitutional but the moral right to revise a yes decision if by any mischance that should come out.
As indeed that paper you've been reading
As
from
it
says.
says.
Thank you both very much indeed, and that is the end at last of our First Report special discussions on the common market. Now all you've got to do is to stagger to the polls if you've got the strength left and vote.